UFC 323 and UFC 324. Starting out with UFC 323, Merab is fighting Peter Yan, and look, I do not think this is as lopsided as the odds indicate. Minus 485 just doesn't sit right with me. Look, minus 45 is number one for an elite title holder, which Merab is, no doubt, against an opponent that is a short notice guy outside the top 10 that doesn't have a style that can compete with him. Merab is probably the second best bantamweight. I don't think there's really a debate. Maybe you could have somebody from 45 come down. Maybe you could have Pantoja come up. But I think it's pretty obvious that even if Yan loses, he's the second best 135er. So I don't like those odds at all for Merab. And look, sometimes there's just a slip on the banana peel type moment. And even if we agree Merab wins, let's say 4 out of 5 fights, it would still make sense to take Peter Yan in that instance if we think Merab's got an 80% chance to win based on the odds. So I think it'll be a good fight. I think it'll be pretty competitive, and it definitely is giving me fight of the year type vibes. A 48-47 win for Merab, very active for both fighters. I could see it being a barn burner. Now, speaking of 125 champion Alexander Pantoja, I do view this as more of a minus 45 type fight. Look, I think Pantoja, he doesn't get that kind of dominant talk because he's a smaller guy, he's a skinnier guy. But I think Pantoja has all the tools to dismantle everybody, barring a Merab were to cut down to 125, and then that would be a real tough fight. But I think at 125, I think he's just going to get outclassed. There are going to be levels to it. I think Van's an exciting fighter when he's fighting somebody that isn't at the skill level as a Pantoja, that doesn't have the wrestling. I think Van is going to get waxed. So what I'm looking at is I would probably go Pantoja, and although I would lean Merab to win, I just don't like those odds, so I'd take a swing at it and go Peter Yan. I think Merab can lose, get the rematch, and then win the rematch. I just don't think Merab, at some point he's going to lose, and Peter Yan's a very formidable opponent. Now, overall, the 323 card, although it's not going to get a lot of casuals, because, we've got Merab, who isn't the most exciting. He's kind of an average champion in a lighter weight class. Pantoja, kind of the same deal, although he's very dominant, which kind of works against him. We got Moreno, which it's kind of whatever. Cejudo and Talbot, that should be definitely an interesting fight for sure at 135. If Talbot wins, presumably he can go into the top 10, maybe. I'll definitely be ranked at least, but I think Talbot probably gets the win there. But maybe Cejudo's kind of that placeholder that's like, no, you're not ready yet. And now in terms of Yan, can Yan maybe get his way back to a title shot? If he wins against number 11, he's number 5 right now. I mean, is Yan that far out? And we're going to discuss 324 because there were some big announcements made in regards to that. And let's get that up, as well as we'll talk about 325 as well. Now, this is going to be the first Paramount card, so on the new streaming platform. And a lot of people were worried that it was going to be Kayla Harrison versus Amanda Nunes. And it's just like, I think it'll be an okay fight. For WMMA, this is probably as good as it's going to get. But you can't, especially as an opener, if you're going to have a WMMA headliner, it just can't be on International Fight Week. It can't be the December card in New York City. It's got to be something in, Vancouver or something like that. But regardless, they ended up getting Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett. Now, a lot of people are not happy about this. They think Arman deserves a title shot, and look, he does. Let's be totally honest. Now, it's tough to tell if the reason Arman isn't getting this fight over Gaethje or Pimblett for an interim title. Now, obviously, we needed an interim title because Illia's going to be out for a while, at least 6 months. So we got to have some action at the 155-pound division. And Arman just fought. Should he probably be the next guy up? Yeah. But you need to have a big fight. Gaethje only will fight for titles, so I guess this is your way to get a little bit more cash out of Gaethje. And more likely than not, this is going to be a Paddy Pimblett win. Build up Pimblett versus Illia. And presumably Illia, if he wins that, would move up to 170. If Illia loses, Probably see a rematch between him and Paddy. Now, in terms of Arman, look, I do not know what is going on with Arman. I don't know who he's going to fight next. I mean, we'll look at the rankings and see kind of what makes sense for him. And yeah, we'll go to the 155-pound division. We got a lot to talk about at featherweight as well. But at lightweight, look, you got Arman, who's obviously the number one contender, who just beat a guy into the top 10. You've got Charles is obviously not fighting for a title, barring something insane. But I don't think Charles can fight for it, especially with Arman beating him and Charles already losing 2 titles and pulling out of one of them. Max would probably have to get another win to fight for a title. Maybe you can do, as unfortunate as it is for Arman, maybe you could do Arman versus Max. But if it's going to be Arman versus Max, the winner of that should probably get the next title shot. So maybe you could do a double. I don't even know if this is a thing in the UFC, but you tell Illia, look, you've got to fight at 170. We need to get you out of the division. We need you up at 170. Although 170 is stacked with Gary, Rachmanov, Morales, Prates, all wanting the 170 shot and all deserving it. But let's say you move Illia up to 170. Then you go Arman and Holloway. The winner of that fights the winner of Paddy versus Gaethje. So you got kind of 2 title eliminators, and maybe that could solve the problem. But then at 170, what do? I mean, do you match up Prates with Morales, and then, or maybe you go Gary and Morales and Shavkat and Prates, and then, I don't know. I mean, are any of those guys 2 wins away from a title? I feel like all those guys are at max 1 win away from a title, if not just a title already. So absolute logjam at 170, which is a good problem to have, and a logjam at 155. Kind of sucks that they're neighboring divisions. Now, at 145, we also got the 325 announcement that Alex Volkanovski will be rematching Lopez, which, look, it just, for Volk, it doesn't make a ton of sense. I mean, he's already beaten Lopez. If he beats him again, it's like, okay, you beat a guy you've already beaten, especially who, if Lopez loses twice to Volk, it kind of knocks him down a tad. I don't know. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I'd probably go Movzar. I think that makes the most sense. Even if Volk loses, which I do think there's a good chance he loses to Movzar or Lopez or Murphy. I think there's a good chance he loses to any of them. At least if he loses to oh my gosh, I'm botching his name. Movzar Evlev. At least if he loses there, it's not as bad for the legacy. It's like, he's an old guy. He got out wrestled. That's fine. But let's check out that full. Let's check out that full 325 card, or at least what they've got so far. Just got that. But maybe, it is kind of interesting that you've got all of the lighter weight classes. You've got the 125, the 135, and then you've got an intermittent title with a WMMA fight, and then you got the 145. It's like, man, 170 through heavyweight's not going to fight at all. It seems like they're going to be a long wait for those fights, but and this can't be right. We've got UFC events on back-to-back weeks, January 24th. Wow, okay. Well, wonder if this is a misprint. 24th and 35th. I believe the 24th number. I don't think they would do it back-to-back weeks. Now, we'll talk about the pound-for-pound list and kind of who should be at the top. I think Islam's fine for sure. Obviously when you can move up a division and still win and dominate, I think it's fair to put you there. Illia, kind of same deal. Those guys can go back and forth. Maybe you even lean Illia because of the style he's winning, but Makhachev is pretty impressive as well. Merab makes sense. I think you'd probably have to have Hamzat above Merab for the fact that Hamzat has wins in multiple divisions. I think, when you're talking about pound for pound, being able to float up and down divisions and dominate the higher weight class division the way that Islam, Illia, and Hamzat did, I think is very impressive. Same thing for Alex Pereira, being able to dominate 185 and then dominate 205. Kind of makes the case that you're a pound for pound top elite guy. I'd probably have to move up Aspinall. Aspinall's got to be above Volk in my opinion. Pantoja can probably be at 4, and yep,